Welcome to Weekly News Highlights, where we catch up on everything from the past week you need to know. Weekly News Highlights will wrap up a week at 12 p.m. Korea time every Saturday and Sunday. Now, this was yet another roller coaster week full of announcements and events at home and abroad. Let's first look back at a few keywords. Coronavirus situation is not getting any better in China. European countries are also imposing travel restrictions on visitors from China. South Korea has warned that the 2018 Inter-Korean military agreement could come to an end if the North continues to push ahead with its provocations. The message came as the regime continues to engage in military provocations, like the recent drone intrusions into the South. There are also some important changes in the labor market in the new year. The minimum hourly wage in the 2023 has gone up 5% from last year to around $7.50, up 5% from last year. The Yoon administration is also set to add more flexibility to the 52-hour workweek. The world's biggest tech show, CES 2023, came back with its biggest ever edition. South Korea's tech giants Samsung and LG also set up giant booths, where LG touted a giant OLED display with 260 screens. Samsung also revealed a smart home solution. The funeral mass for the late Pope Benedict XVI took place on Thursday. The ceremony was led by Pope Francis, who was the first sitting pope in the modern age to eulogize a retired one. South Korea's commander-in-chief has warned that any more provocations by North Korea, like the recent intrusions by its drones, could bring an end to the Inter-Korean military agreement. Our Kim Do-yeon has the details.
South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol is warning North Korea that its behavior is putting the 2018 Inter-Korean military agreement at risk.
President Yoon was briefed on Wednesday by the National Security Office, the Defense Ministry, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the Defense Development Agency on our drone defense strategy. He ordered officials to review suspending the September 19th Inter-Korean military agreement if North Korea carries out provocations involving incursion into our territory.
The 2018 Inter-Korean military agreement refers to an agreement signed by former President Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un back in 2018, which prohibits the two Koreas from flying around and carrying out on-land military exercises, including artillery firing around the military demarcation line, while also putting buffer zones along their sea borders, in order to prevent direct confrontations. However, North Korea has violated the terms of the agreement several times, most recently flying drones into the South Korean territory as far as into the northern side of the capital. That said, on top of his statement, President Yoon also issued 4 directives to the defense minister. 1. To create a drone unit that can both carry out reconnaissance as well as combat. 2. To mass produce small drones that are hard to detect within this year. 3. To develop stealth drones. And lastly, to quickly come up with an anti-drone system. An official at the Defense Ministry expressed confidence that all the orders do seem possible to carry out. This includes creating a new multi-purpose drone unit. The official said that while creating a new unit requires the ministry to review a number of items, including the new unit's scope of operation, chain of command, as well as resources, the process will be expedited as much as possible. However, there was no specific timeline given. As for developing a stealth drone within this year, according to the official, the Defense Development Agency has already been doing research into stealth drones, and by pushing things faster, such drone will be developed by the end of the year. South Korea has already had a drone unit since 2018, but the unit had much smaller scope of operation with not much on-field exercise and experience, according to the official. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
South Korea's second test flight of a homegrown solid-fuel space rocket turned out to be more successful than the first one. The Defense Ministry said this brings the country one step closer to securing independent space security capabilities. Our Choi Min-jung reports.
South Korea assesses that its second test flight of a solid-fuel space launch vehicle appears to be more successful than the first one. The Defense Ministry on Monday released a video of the homegrown rocket being launched and entering space. It said the state-run Agency for Defense Development tested the second, third, and fourth stages of the launch, including the separation of a dummy satellite. It was able to verify the engine combustion for these stages as well. Last Friday, the Defense Ministry confirmed the success of the vehicle's second launch, which came 9 months after the first test. The rocket is designed to put a small satellite into a low orbit for surveillance operations. It's aiming to launch an actual satellite in 2025. Compared with liquid fuel space vehicles, solid fuel rockets have simpler structure and are more cost-effective to launch. The success of the test launch marks an important milestone in building the military's independence in the field, as well as the country's goal of becoming the seventh largest player in the global space industry. The ministry also said it's looking to transfer essential technologies to the private sector to boost the industry and create economic effects. Some citizens across the country witnessed Friday's launch and reported an unidentified flying object in the sky. The ministry explained that the test was conducted at night due to safety and weather conditions and to minimize disruptions for fishermen. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The parliamentary probe on the Itaewon crowd crush also took place this week, full of intense questioning and expressions of regret. Our Han Sang-woo has the details.
South Korea's Minister of the Interior and Safety, Lee Sang-min, has officially apologized in person to the families bereaved by the Itaewon crowd crush tragedy.
On behalf of the government and on a personal level, I sincerely apologize to the bereaved families of the Itaewon tragedy who lost their loved ones on October 29th.
At the National Assembly on Friday, Minister Lee, Seoul Mayor Oh Se-hun, and Health Minister Jo Kyu-hong were all questioned during the second hearing of the parliamentary probe into the tragedy. The Interior Minister, in particular, was grilled by lawmakers from the main opposition, Democratic Party of Korea, who pressured him to resign for what they claimed to be the government's inadequate response to the disaster.
For your apology to hold any real weight, you must follow it up with action. The first step should be your immediate resignation.
Legislators from the ruling People Power Party came to Lee's defense, accusing opposition lawmakers of using the parliamentary hearing as part of a political scheme to lure the minister into a perjury trap.
It worries me that this hearing is being held not to get to the bottom of what happened on that tragic night, but rather to collect evidence in the attempt to impeach Minister Lee Sang-min.
Not long after, the National Assembly approved a bipartisan agreement to extend the parliamentary investigation by 10 days until January 17. The floor leaders of the ruling party and the opposition had jointly announced that they would do so the day before. Details will still have to be ironed out, but the Special Probe Committee's third hearing is scheduled for next week. Until then, it's expected the rival parties will collide over whether to summon survivors of the tragedy and family members of those who died as witnesses. Han Sang-woo, Arirang News.
The minimum wage in South Korea has risen at the start of 2023. The government is also aiming to increase flexibility in the current 52-hour work week. Our Lee Dae-yeon has details about the labor market changes in the new year.
It's now the era of the 2 million won salary. The minimum hourly wage in 2023 has been set at 9,621. At the current exchange rate, it's approximately $7.50. That's up 5% or about 30 cents from last year. This is applied from the first day of this year. Converting this into a monthly payment, assuming someone works 209 hours a month, this would come to around 2.01 million won or $1,570. This was decided back in June by the Minimum Wage Commission, considering the needs of small businesses hit hard by the pandemic. Here's what some members of the public had to say on the wage increase.
The minimum wage is now almost 10,000 won, and I think it's a little too much. Convenience stores are run by owners these days because they need to pay part-time workers 2 million won a month if they hire them.
Considering rising consumer prices, I think the recent minimum wage increase is not enough. Think about the salaries that young people get. I'm hoping for the wage to rise even more.
Apart from the minimum wage, the union administration is set to increase flexibility in the 52-hour work week. Earlier last month, the Future Labor Market Research Association advised that labor and management be allowed to manage overtime work hours on a monthly, quarterly, half-yearly, or even yearly basis in addition to the current weekly basis. The association also recommended allowing workers to freely set their work hours. But there's a rocky road ahead as a labor umbrella organization has opposed the new policy proposals. An expert says there should be additional measures to prevent overwork.
At least the government should set the maximum working days in a week. With flexible working hours, a worker might have to work even 7 days a week when there's too big a workload. To prevent this, there should be restrictions on the number of working days an employer can order an employee to work, like less than 5 days a week.
The government would have to consider additional measures for any possible excessive workload that may harm the health of workers, as controversy still remains about whether the new work system can be properly implemented. Itaewon, Arirang News.
The world's largest tech extravaganza, the Consumer Electronics Show, kicked off at Las Vegas on Thursday. Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, tech titans that missed the show last year due to the Omicron, came back in CES 2023. South Korea's Samsung and LG also showed off their latest innovations. Our Kim Hyun-sung reports.
A tech extravaganza of more than 3,000 companies touting their most innovative work. It's the Consumer Electronics Show 2023. This year, it's back to its pre-pandemic glory, with tech titans Google, Amazon, and Microsoft returning. They were absent for last year's show due to the spread of Omicron. CES expects more than 100,000 people to visit during the 4-day event.
It's fantastic. There's a ton of stuff to see.
I actually was here in 2019 as well, before the pandemic, and it is really wonderful to be back.
It's easy to get lost in the winding maze of CES, packed with a plethora of booths. So here's a quick and easy guide. Samsung and LG go head-to-head with bending screens. LG has put forward its latest foldable OLED display, while Samsung premiered its Flex Hybrid, a screen that's both foldable and stretchable. The two South Korean tech giants also try to get visitors' attention with their show-stopping booths. LG has a mega display of 260 OLED screens. This year, its crowning pieces were the wireless OLED screen and the crisp built-in displays for cars of the future. Samsung took up 3,000 meters of space and unveiled its latest easy-to-use smart home solution called SmartThings. Automakers steal the scene. From color-changing concept cars from BMW to a flying electric car from Asuka, CES took future cars to the next level. Japanese company Sony also unveiled its prototype electric car, a joint venture with Honda that takes the best of both worlds and offers in-car gaming. Sustainability is at the core. From South Korean shipbuilder Hyundai Heavy's eco-friendly maritime transport to SK's food truck selling animal-free dairy desserts, sustainability was behind many of the innovations at CES. This year more than ever, scientists are geared towards inventions that support a greener future. But all the glamour of the CES may be chipped away by economic uncertainty. With potential investors becoming a little more cautious, analysts say they've been looking for quick returns rather than long-term promise. So many of the most futuristic ideas from capital-hungry startups may not see the light of day. But even this glum projection wasn't enough to fully dampen the enthusiastic buzz at CES that has returned in full swing. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
Former Pope Benedict XVI was finally laid to rest on Thursday. The funeral mass was led by Pope Benedict's successor, Pope Francis, marking the first time in the modern age that a current pope was eulogized a retired one. Our Shin Ye-eun reports.
Pope Benedict XVI was laid to rest on Thursday morning as around 100,000 people gathered at St. Peter's Square to pay tribute. The funeral mass in Vatican City was held after a 3-day wake, visited by some 200,000 mourners from around the world.
I'm very happy to be here. He was a great pope, and he left the church his legacy of being friends with Jesus.
Pope Francis led the ceremony, marking the first time in the modern era that a current pope has presided over the funeral of a predecessor.
Holding fast to the Lord's last words and to the witness of his entire life, we too, as an ecclesial community, want to follow in his steps and to commend our brother into the hands of the Father.
Attending were German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier and Italian President Sergio Mattarella. Also the King of Belgium and former Queen of Spain, as well as the leaders of Poland and Hungary. Pope Benedict's body was buried in the former tomb of John Paul II, who was the head of the Catholic Church before him. Officials have said the funeral was kept simple in accordance with the late former pontiff's wishes. Pope Benedict died on New Year's Eve at the age of 95, roughly a decade after stepping down due to health reasons. He was the first pope in 6 centuries to do so. 신윤, Arirang News.
Starting Thursday, arrivals from China must take PCR test before entering South Korea and upon arrival here. The move comes as more and more travelers from the country have tested positive. Our Lee Seung-jae has the latest.
According to the World Health Organization on Thursday, COVID-19 hospitalization figures have soared nearly 50% over the past week. The data on the weekly status of COVID-19 in China, released by the WHO, shows that the number of new COVID-19 hospitalization in China increased by 46% on week. Chinese authorities also say 218,019 new cases of COVID-19 and 648 deaths were reported this week. However, the WHO says it's unclear if the data supplied by China is accurate and that the situation could be even worse. Airfinity, a British medical data analysis company, estimates 2 million COVID-19 cases per day in China and around 10,000 deaths. Despite this, China reaffirmed its stance that it has been transparent with its data.
Facts have proven that China has always maintained close communication with the World Health Organization and shared relevant information and data in a timely manner in accordance with the principles of law, timeliness, openness, and transparency.
In response to growing calls from the EU to its member states to impose stricter travel measures for travelers from China, Germany, Belgium, and Sweden are set to mandate COVID-19 testing before entry to their countries. Germany had previously been against such measures on the grounds that a new mutant virus had not yet emerged in China, but sharply changed its stance after the EU recommendation. Hitting back, the Chinese Foreign Ministry says COVID-19 measures should be based on science and facts, and that there should be no attempts to politicize the issue or adopt a discriminatory practice that affects regular person-to-person exchanges. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Lots of news this week, but topping this week's weekly news highlights was COVID-19 situation in China and how it has affected us here in South Korea. And countries around the world are also stepping up virus measures on China as Beijing continues to grapple with a crushing wave of infections. Now, for more on this, we've invited our reporter Song Yujin here in the studio. Welcome, Yujin.
Pleasure to be here, Tammy.
All right, so let's start with how things are being done in South Korea. So what's being done in South Korea to prevent a new surge?
Well, Tommy, first of all, I can just say that the virus situation is not so good. Around 1 in every 4 foreign nationals visiting short-term from China have tested positive for COVID-19 this week. And by short-term, it means that they'll stay in the country 90 days or less. The Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency has yet to release data on Korean nationals and non-Koreans staying in the country for the long term. And also the latest data shows that as of Thursday, out of all cases originating studying abroad. China accounted for 70%. And all this information is available because South Korea has currently imposed stricter travel restrictions on China. To start off, starting January 2nd, all travelers from China had to submit a PCR test taken within 1 day of arrival. The government also suspended the issuance of short-term visas for Chinese nationals until the end of this month. Then from Thursday, those arriving from China were required to submit a negative PCR test that was taken within 48 hours or a rapid antigen test that was taken 1 day before boarding their flights. And also starting Saturday, which is January 7th, travelers from Hong Kong and Macau also have to submit a negative PCR test result before arrival. And these test requirements will be in effect until February, but authorities say they could be extended or even strengthened if the situation turns severe. And South Korea is only one of many countries imposing stringent virus rules. At least 14 countries, including the United States, Japan, India, and Australia, have announced tougher measures. And the European Union announced Thursday that it strongly encourages 27 member states to require a COVID test before entering.
So that's a total of 2 PCR tests that travelers from China have to take in order to enter South Korea, right?
You're right.
So a lot is being done here in South Korea and also around the globe. But let's go back to China. What's the virus situation at the moment?
Well, first of all, we can't really say with certainty how many confirmed COVID cases and related deaths Beijing is seeing right now. That's because the country has been accused of underreporting its COVID tally. And for one, the WHO Executive Director for Health Emergencies says that China's hospitalizations, ICU admissions, and death toll are underrepresenting the true impact of the virus. And China reported 1 new COVID death on the mainland on Wednesday, which brings the official death toll to 5,259. However, experts predict that the number has already surpassed 1 million. And we're continuing to see videos online showing overwhelmed hospitals, crematoriums, and people struggling to get basic medicines. So we can say that the situation is quite dire here.
Right. I saw gruesome footages and really heartbreaking. Now, going forward, are there any predictions how this situation might unfold? Like, I've heard that there'll be big changes to China's travel restrictions coming up soon.
You're definitely right, because the country will be reopening its borders for the first time in 3 years since the outbreak of COVID-19. Now, specifically from Sunday, which is January 8th, mainland China will no longer require PCR tests and quarantine for all inbound travelers, and it will also stop controls on the number of international passenger flights. And this comes after the country's National Health Commission downgraded COVID-19 to a Class B infectious disease from the highest Class A, and it will also resume the issuance of passports for mainland residents, ordinary visas, and residence permits for foreign nationals, as well as tourist visa exemptions for short-term travelers. And a medical expert I talked to that this could be actually bad news.
Scrapping mandatory testing and quarantine could lead to more infections and the emergence of new variants. Relaxed travel rules also mean more Chinese citizens will travel abroad, which could trigger cross-border transmission of new variants. South Korea is especially at risk as we're very close to China.
And we also have the upcoming Chinese New Year holiday that will run from January 21st to 27th, where a lot of people are expected to move around the country. And it's the first holiday without the so-called China's zero COVID policy. Actually, China's Ministry of Transport expects hundreds of millions of people to be on the move this year following eased COVID restrictions.
Right, I heard that it's going to be the biggest movement in 2023 since the pre-pandemic years, right?
Right. And also, an official from the country's health body warned that widespread COVID-19 outbreaks could hit rural areas if huge number of people travel to their hometowns for the holiday. So there definitely has to be more care and attention taken throughout this period.
That's right, and South Korea is also keeping a close eye on China's virus situation because we all, including myself, are looking forward to the lifting of indoor mask wearing, right?
Yes, you're definitely right. And I'm also one of those people who is eagerly waiting for the indoor mask rule to be lifted. And health authorities last year, they actually announced that the indoor mask rule could be lifted sometime early this year between January and March. And experts are viewing that China's COVID surge as the last hurdle to lifting this rule.
If the virus situation abroad leads to a new virus spreading in the country, we'll discuss with experts the best time to ease the indoor mask rules. It could be pushed back.
So health officials in the country, they're urging and asking people to do all they can to protect themselves from the coronavirus. And this includes, of course, refraining from traveling to China for a while. And for those who do visit, it's important to wear a mask and get vaccinated in advance. And authorities in the country, they're actually encouraging people to get the upgraded bivalent COVID vaccines, which are known to be effective to new emerging variants and strains as well. But a little over 10% of the population has gotten them so far. But one of the 4 criteria for lifting the indoor mask mandate was a vaccination rate of 50% among seniors and 60% among care facility workers and residents. But the rate now stands at a little over 30% and 50% each.
Right, coronavirus situation in China and also globally is something that we have to keep a close eye on even in the new year. All right, thank you for joining us, Yujin.
Thank you.
That's all we have for this weekend's weekly news highlights. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Goodbye.